Hey everybody, welcome to Cycle News. Welcome to 2024. I hope you've all had a really good break and are now stuck into another year. Anyway, let's get to it. We are doing a comparison test today. Today we are comparing the Suzuki GSX-S1000GT Plus next to the 2024 Yamaha Tracer 9 GT Plus. So it's a battle of the GT Pluses, shall we say. Now this bike, the Suzuki, came out in 2022. It hasn't been changed or altered at all since then. Yamaha, on the other hand, has been changed and altered, but we'll get into those things in a little minute. Well, a bit of a touch on the Suzuki. Suzuki is going to cost you $14,199. I had to write it down because there's a lot of stuff to try and remember here. It is based primarily, the engine I should say, is based primarily off the K5 Suzuki GSX-R1000. That's Suzuki's greatest hit and their greatest hits. We've waxed lyrical about that engine for years, so we don't need to go too much into that. 999cc inline 4-cylinder, very old school sounding motor, got tons of torque, great throttle response, real sort of brutal motor. Suzuki calls it their kind of small block Chev. You know, it's that sort of motor that was legendary for one particular car and then got put out to stud for a whole heap of others. So this is exactly what the GSX-R K5 motor has done over the years. It's gone into the Katana, it's got on the other GSXs, and yeah, it's a hell of an engine. But on the electronic side of things, and I've got to say straight off the bat, a lot of this stuff is electronics with these two bikes. On the electronic side of things, there is no IMU, no 6-axis IMU on the Suzuki, which that then kind of bleeds into what you're going to be able to get in terms of no cornering traction control, I should say. It's got 3-stage traction control, 5-stage traction control actually. No cornering, ABS, things like that. The Suzuki has basic cruise control, and you also get a 6.5-inch dash, which is actually Suzuki's, funnily enough, it's Suzuki's first ever TFT color dash. Welcome to the 21st century. But yeah, it's a wonderful bike, this thing. Two 27.5 litre side cases as well, which fit a Arai helmet, or my Arai helmet, I should say, just nicely. They're a little bit wider than the Yamahas. The Yamahas have a bit of a slimmer case. So incidentally, the Yamaha's luggage capacity is 30 litres per side, but because the top cases are slimmer, they're actually harder to fit a full face helmet in. They both will fit a full face helmet, but it's a bit of finagling on the Yamaha. So that's just that. With the 6.5-inch dash, you can get the Suzuki MyRide app, and that allows you to do turn-by-turn navigation. I just wish that we could, for once, well, not for once, there are bikes that do it, but I wish there would be someone out there that we could get an industry consensus where you could just run Apple CarPlay. Because I've got so many apps on my phone from various times of having to Bluetooth this and plug that and pull this lever and just to be able to get maps, turn-by-turn navigation. But look, that's not a problem that you guys are going to have to deal with when you buy one of these bikes, because once you just get your map and your app and your map done, you're dialed, and then you can take phone calls, messages, all that stuff. But look, I don't know about you guys, but I don't worry about any of that stuff. Occasionally I'll look at maps, but I'm riding a bike to get away from people and I don't want to talk to people. I like to listen to music, and that's about it. Moving on to the Yamaha, now $16,499 MSRP. So we're starting to get up there a little bit now in terms of price. So it's $2,300 more than the Suzuki. You're running 3-cylinder 890cc inline motor, which is just one of the greatest engines ever. It is so much fun. It's really become a polished diamond, I should say. It was a bit of a rough diamond when it first came out back in the sort of about 10 years ago now, actually. I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah, it's a fantastic motor, very, very peppy, got plenty of torque. This one, unfortunately, does tend to suffer a little bit from a flat spot, which the Suzuki doesn't. Between sort of 5 and sort of 7,000, 8,000 RPM, it sort of labors through a bit of a flat spot. That's all to do with emissions. You know, I've said it on so many different bikes before, and you know, Hondas suffer from it, BMWs suffer from it. It's not quite as I say, it's not quite as prevalent on the Suzuki, but on the Yamaha it definitely is. But fairly redesigned, new design seat on this, but the main difference, so the engine and the chassis is the same. You have KYB semi-automatic or electronically adjustable suspension. You have two modes as well. You've got A1 and A2, A1 being stiffest, A2 being the sort of softer ride mode. You also have 4 ride modes. Incidentally, you've got 3 ride modes on this. 4 ride modes: range, street, sport, and custom is what it is. Now the custom allows you to get in there and change whatever it is that you want. So you can, because this thing does have an IMU, a 6-axis IMU, you do have cornering traction control, you do have, you know, lift control, you've got, you know, cornering ABS, all that kind of stuff. So you can get into the Yamaha and you can change whatever parameters that you want. There is quite a big difference in the Yamaha between the hardest and the softest setting in the suspension. I personally just like the softer setting. Don't really need it for what that bike is good for, which is nice sort of medium speed canyon sort of cruising, and not taking this thing to a racetrack and trying to rip its head off. These things are, you know, they are different, but they are also aimed very much at the same customer. Now, one of the big things with Yamaha is it has radar adaptive cruise control, and we've seen that first come out on the Ducati Multistrada a few years ago. It's now starting to trickle down to all kinds of bikes. The electronics package on the Yamaha is outstanding, but with the ACC adaptive cruise control, you also get the unified brake system. Now, that's a first for any motorcycle, as far as I'm aware, in that when you come up to, if you're closing in on a car and then it senses where you've set your cruise control parameter to, you can sit up there and it'll pull both brakes in at the same time and then just keep you at that right speed, whereas the other ones will sort of take off the accelerator. It'll do that as well, don't get me wrong, you're not going to keep accelerating while it's on the brakes. But it's quite a good system, very easy to understand and very easy to use. You get one of, I think it's 3 systems, 4. See, I have to keep looking at my things. It's very hard to remember. Yeah, 4 preset levels for your distance to the car in front. Usually, I think there's a shortest distance of 1 second and a maximum of 2. You know, you try to just keep 2 seconds at 70 miles an hour is a decent amount of space, so it gives you plenty of time to react if anything goes wrong. Yamaha also are at pains to tell you that this is not a collision avoidance system. Like, if something happens in front and those guys slam on the brakes, you've still got to be ready. You know, a unified brake system is not going to stop you from plowing into the back of a car. So that's something to bear in mind. Okay, so now that we've sort of got through the brass tacks of the bikes, what do they like to ride? Well, very different, yet they are aimed at the same people. These are still sports tourers, regardless of which way you like. The Suzuki has a bit more of just a slightly more of a sportier stance to it, whereas the Yamaha, you are very bolt upright, and that seems to be a better thing for me, at least in terms of general commuting. That's kind of how I like my riding, and it's just like a big naked bike, really. But on the longer rides that I'm going to do, which is primarily why I'm going to buy one of these bikes, longer rides I prefer the Suzuki's ride position. So the Suzuki has a shorter seat height, 31.9 inches, and the Yamaha is 32.3, but you can also jack that up further. You can get it, I think, to 32.9, so it makes a decent amount of difference. But the big killer for me in terms of the ride position on the Yamaha, that bloody screen. Oh man, I don't know who signed off on that screen. I can't figure it out, because I'm 6'1". We've had riders on this as 6'3", 6'2", 5'10", and every single one of them always says that that screen is the worst thing about this bike. It's actually 10 stage adjustable, that screen, but really it's one stage. It's either up or it's down. You can change it on the fly, thank God, by a lever at the back, but any way you put it, that air gets directed either here or there. And I'll tell you, on a long ride, it does your head in, literally, because it's just like having an air blower in your face. The Suzuki, on the other hand, is a much lower screen. It angles the wind so it hits you right in the chest, and that makes for a much more enjoyable ride over a long period. I guess the trade-off with the Yamaha is that you have a bit more distance from the seat to the bottom to the pegs, so you can give your legs a little bit more of a rest, whereas the Suzuki, you're a little bit more sort of jacked up. But overall, I much prefer the Suzuki's ride position. I think it's a lot more comfortable over long rides. As I say, just ripping down to the shops, you take the Yamaha, no worries. In terms of engine performance between the two bikes, the Suzuki is very much an old school superbike style bike. It's got tons of grunt, it sounds awesome, like it's got that real gruff kind of, you know, attitude about it, and it has a lot more top end than what the Yamaha does. The Yamaha's got really nice bottom end torque, as I say, good for general commuting and just ripping around, just click, click, click up through the gears, and everything's good. Both bikes come with quick shifters. The Suzuki's, I think, is a little bit smoother than Yamaha's, even though the Yamaha has been revamped for this year. But overall, you know, I got to say I'm leaning towards the Suzuki as if I'm going to pick one of these two bikes. I think the versatility of the Yamaha is almost a little bit lost in some areas. Like, it's really, really good as a commuter, maybe not quite as good as a full-on sports tourer, which really that's what these bikes are. The Suzuki isn't bad as a commuter at all. Trust me, it's great. You know, as soon as you get on the freeway from my place and, you know, then through some of the back streets, it's really, really good. It turns really nicely. It has a real lovely fluidity in the steering. The Yamaha, by comparison, because it is a little bit taller and a little bit shorter, it has a bit more of a nervous kind of feeling to it. And it's not saying that it's bad, it just turns a fair bit quicker than the Suzuki. So you kind of have to be on your toes a little bit like that. Some guys love it. I personally prefer a little bit more stability over long sweeping corners, things like that, which tend to make me kind of look a little bit more towards the Suzuki. I got to say also, in terms of looks, I'm taking that hands down. I know this has been revamped, I know the Yamaha's been revamped, but I just can't dig the looks as much as what I can the Suzuki. I think aesthetically the Suzuki's really done the trick, and that blue paint just looks fantastic. Whereas this is, I guess this is how it always was with the Tracer. It was always, you know, a bit robotic in its stance. So maybe I'm starting to go a bit back towards the old school of that. Now, for $14,199, the Suzuki does represent really good value. It depends on what you want out of your bikes, right? But the Yamaha has, you know, all the lift controls, the traction controls, the slide controls, the, you know, this, and this. The problem with Suzuki is that it doesn't come with heated hand grips, which for a sports touring bike is an absolute own goal. They should come with heated hand grips as standard. The Yamaha does. So look, $2,500, you know, probably a bit more after you've taken your taxes and dealer fees and all this sort of stuff. It might be about $3,000, I don't know exactly, between these two bikes. It's a decent chunk of change, and look, you can put heated hand grips on Suzuki for a couple $100 and you're good. But look, I got to say, at the end of the day, I find that I had a more comfortable and more enjoyable ride on the Suzuki. I also like how those panniers are a little bit more of the old school shape. It makes it easy to fit a helmet in, especially if your helmet's got you know, air intakes and winglets and all kinds of junk that they have on helmets these days. The Yamaha's got a bit more luggage touring capacity, which if that's what you're after, you're just after straight space, then yeah, for sure, go for the Yamaha, because it will give you more stuff to be able to, more room to be able to take your stuff when you go on your big rides. You know, you can fit top boxes and everything to both of these things. So like, you know, if you need more space, you can always just go buy more. I think at the end of the day, yeah, I'm going to go for the Suzuki. Both bikes are very, very good bikes. They represent the kind of the end of one era in terms of the old school electronics and the start of the next era. So it's up to you which one you want, but for my money, I'm taking the Suzuki.